Good morning, everybody. Today is, believe it or not, the second day of October, 2024. My, oh my, how time flies. I am Dr. Peter Glidden, Bastyr 1991, your steadfast advocate for freedom in the medical market and vitalistic naturopathic therapeutics, quite frankly, any medical therapeutics that are curative, which is an interesting thing that's lacking, sorely lacking in the medical marketplace of today. And for the last 100 years, we have been underneath the jackbooted heel of a monopolized medical market, which exists to forward their own agenda and to keep people like us at bay. I mean, come on, for goodness sakes. Naturopathic medicine only licensed in 24 states? Well, what does that mean? That the laws of nature change if you cross the state line? I don't think so, folks. It's all about turf. And remember the pharmaceutical mantra, a patient cured is a customer lost. I mean, thank God for insulin. Thank God for general anesthesia, but come on, enough is enough. We desperately need freedom in the medical marketplace. And honestly, we need more vitalists. Because if by some genie in the bottle magic, we all woke up tomorrow and there were just as many vitalists as medical doctors in this country, if insurance paid for everything, if hospitals allowed access to everything, if universities did half of their research on vitalistic therapeutics, if all of that were to happen within 2 years, medical doctors, general family practices, medical doctors who weren't surgeons or trauma care docs would be out of a job. Because in a free medical market, people gravitate towards what works. And one of the leading vitalists of naturopathic medicine in the world is with us this morning. We're going to have fun today, I think. I can feel it. I feel it brewing. Dr. Jason Kinley, straight from Spokane. Dr. Kinley, welcome aboard.
Thank you very much, Dr. Glidden. How are you today?
Best day of my life so far.
That's good.
God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll see what happens. I'm a little, not through any fault of your own, but through a fault of my own, unclear about the educational background. Or what school did you go to and when?
So I went to Bastyr University in Kenmore, in Washington State, and that's where I received my doctorate in naturopathic medicine. Before that, undergraduate at Oakland University in Michigan, not California. Most people have never heard of it. Originally, it was a teaching school. That's what it was designed as, in part. So many years ago, I thought maybe I would be into the world of education as far as conventional teaching. Being a doctor, docere, we know means to educate our patients. So I still have actually followed the pursuit of education. I am teaching every day. It's just in the world of medicine and not in a classroom with multiple students per class, if you will.
Yeah, what year did you graduate ND school?
I graduated in 2016, so 8 years ago, and been treating patients for about 10 years and on my own the whole time since.
So where did you have to go in order to learn naturopathic vitalistic therapeutics?
Outside the school. It's one of those things that I tell preceptors. I get students in and they feel dismayed because they're not learning some of the things. And I said, look, the school has an obligation to teach you to the licensed standards. Now that's a whole separate conversation in terms of what should those standards potentially be, et cetera. But if they're going to give you, for example, in Montana, they give you all naturally derived substances, is my understanding. I don't hold a license there, but I've talked to colleagues that do. So morphine is within their schedule of prescriptive authority. Well, you better be doggone sure you know all the pharmacology and all the implications if you're going to be able to prescribe that. So that's what the schools are teaching towards. So they're there to make sure that you don't kill someone. Right. But when I was in school, I met Dr. Eli Camp at a business seminar that she came out to teach at Bastyr. And she said, there's this guy, and I'd never heard of him, Dr. Jim Sensenig at the time. And he's going to be at the Northwest Naturopathic Physicians Conference, and it was in Seattle that year. And she said, "You need to go and sit down and meet this guy." Okay, I'll take your word for it. Because at that time, he was not allowed to teach at Bastyr. His name was never mentioned. I had never heard of him until Dr. Camp had introduced him to me. I said, okay, I'm going to go check this guy out. I already know who Dr. Letitia Dick was because I had lived in Spokane previously. So I knew who she was, but I didn't understand the gravity of the importance, rather, of her clinic with her father and her in the world of naturopathic medicine. Because when you're an outsider, you're just like, well, it's a doctor, it's a naturopath. You know, you don't understand the difference because at that time the NMI didn't exist. So there wasn't this additional credential that you could have after your name. It was you were an ND and that's all I knew. So I go down and I meet Dr. Sensenig and he's sitting there with Dr. Joel Wallach. So two of the most interesting people you could potentially sit in on with a conversation as a student and go, you're naturopaths? Yeah. This doesn't sound anything. What is going on? And so that is where I got really introduced to this. So after meeting with those two, I continued to attend the Northwest Naturopathic Physicians Conference until its last year, which was in 2017, I believe, up in Vancouver, British Columbia. And so I went for I think 3 or 4 years in a row. And I went because that's where all the older doctors had gone. Dr. Jim Sensing was there. Dr. Jared Zeff was there. Dr. Tom Cruzel would go. You would see Dr. Charlie Cropley. All these other doctors were meeting there. And that group would break off and have kind of their own conversations after the conference was over. And I was invited into that group because Dr. Camp suggested it. So following that, I then said, these are the doctors I need to learn from. So I then proceeded to spend time in Dr. Zeff's office as a student. So I would drive I don't remember how far it was at the time, 2.5, 3 hours after a clinic shift to go get a hotel room and stay the night so that I could then spend the next day with Dr. Zeff. And I did that for a while. I flew to Germany to go study hydrotherapy in Germany in 2016. I flew back to Seattle for Easter. We got home Holy Saturday night, my wife and I, with our youngest at the time, went to Mass for Easter and caught a red eye out to Connecticut to go spend a week with Dr. Jim Sensenig. During that week, I was on one of the earliest Vital Conversations as a student at that time, discussing hydrotherapy and the impact that Germany had and that he was having on my education. So that is how I sought out those kinds of things. And it was all because Dr. Camp suggested I go talk to one person. Change the course of my career.
Yeah, wow. 100%. And, that speaks to a number of things, I think. Number one, it's just a shame that, these therapeutics and this philosophy is no longer offered through the, conventional education of the naturopath, number one. Number two, most vitalists, I've never really done a survey, but I'm willing to say 100% of people who practice real naturopathic therapeutics it's more like a calling than it is, a job. Because that's a massive amount of dedication. Get into your car after a clinic shift and drive 3 hours, get a hotel so you can hang out at Dr. Zeff's office the next day. Who does that? Right.
Yeah, it was for one day too. It was only for, I'd spend one clinic day with him and then turn around and go home. It wasn't like I was down there for multiple days. It was 7 hours of driving so I could get 8 hours with him.
Our colleague, Andre Sain, he just published a 2-volume book on the life of Adolf Lippe, who was Hahnemann's, best student. And it was Lippe who really carried the flame of homeopathic medicine after Hahnemann died. And I just started to read it 2 weeks ago, and it was really mind-blowing to me that in the history of homeopathic medicine, as it has evolved over the years, there arose a rift in the homeopathic profession exactly the same as the rift that has arisen in the naturopathic medical profession.
Mm.
And it was a real eye opener to me because I didn't number one, I wasn't aware of it. Number two, I wasn't aware of it. Number three, I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah,
And,
right.
and it was a really big deal back in the day with all of these kind of, offshoots of the original homeopathic philosophy with the law of similars and the law of potentization. And after Hahnemann died, people would come along and they'd have their own ideas about how they needed to change it. And so they would change it and then dilute it. And then it would be changed and it would be diluted. And then it would be changed and it would be diluted. And then you start to get horrible clinical results, which is one of the reasons why, if you read the old time, the homeopathic clinic books from like the 1800s, they were curing things like bubonic plague and smallpox. I mean, it was remarkable their effectiveness in understanding how to affect the law of similars. And most of that has been lost in the current day. And, I think homeopathy is hanging on by a thread, the same way that naturopathic vitalism is hanging on by a thread. I just thought that it was curious, right? That these two things should be happening. And I guess it goes to the old adage that history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. It's just an interesting sociological phenomenon that there should be this much division inside of
Yeah,
the
well,
wonderful world of holism.
I mean, just like I was just reading the other day in one of the physicians groups that somebody posted that Medscape wants you to know that the future of medicine will revolve around the gut. So just in case anybody was wondering, the conventional system is saying that's where the future of medicine will lie. Except I think we've been talking about that literally for probably centuries. I'm not aware of all the writings, but we know that my predecessors always said, treat the hole in the middle.
Right.
That's not new information. We were talking before we got started about, the joke that the duck walks into a bar and says, "Hey, I'll have a drink." And the bartender says, "How do you want me to pay for that?" And he says, "Just put it on my bill." Ha ha ha, right? Old school joke. But it really made me think about the lack of accountability, which is what we were talking about before. And this is how you get into this holism and this division. I think it's part of or a piece of the problem. And that is, if the duck walks into the doctor and says, "I have a headache," and he tells the doctor, "Yeah, I got this headache. Here's the thing." Doctor says, "Here are your pills, and we're going to add it to your bill because you can deal with it later, the cost." Well, we push the costs of lots of things down the road. Your cell phone bill, you can go in and buy it's $1,000 phone, but you don't have to pay for it right now. We're just going to keep you basically tethered to us by having you continue to pay for this. Oh, and by the way, if you pay it off early, and I know because I was just curious one day when I got a new phone, if you pay it off early, you get penalized. They penalize you by making you pay all the additional taxes because they don't give you the sale price.
Right.
Now, if you paid for it up front, then you would get the discount. So you can't suddenly go back and be like, "Well, I've been improving and now I want to make this change." No, you're now penalized. So we don't teach accountability across a lot of different spectrums in the world, and medicine is the same. And so really, when we get into vitalism, what we're doing is we're trying to teach our patients accountability. How do you return to taking accountability that the food that you put in your mouth has a direct correlation? I know Dr. Sensenig used to say he had a colleague that would get a conversation with a patient who had been to a gastroenterologist, and the gastroenterologist would tell the patient, "Oh, food has no bearing on your gut health." And the colleague had this thing where they would take the glasses off, put the glasses down, because he told the story enough. I know I've heard it. And they would look at him and go, "So you're telling me that food has no bearing whatsoever on your digestive tract? That's interesting." And the patients always would go, "Yeah, actually, that doesn't make any sense." I had the same exact thing happen 2 days ago. Patient came in, gastroenterologist. "Yeah, they tell me their food has no bearing whatsoever." I don't understand how we can continue to push that message when we clearly can see all of these different modalities that people are using, Everlywell at-home test, US Biotech IgG testing, which is what Dr. Sensenig and some others use, the Carroll food assessment, which is what I use. We're all looking at food. We know there's a direct correlation. And then when you add the chemical exposures, et cetera, so all of these things that people are consuming, putting in their water, their food supply, problems with supplements. We have some, tainted supplements out there. If it's the fad, methylene blue is one. If you're familiar with methylene blue at all,
I am.
right? Methylene blue, when used appropriately, I think it can be super effective. The problem is there's so many distributors of it. Not everybody needs it. And if you don't know what the quality control, it's one of the most toxic substances you can get with heavy metals. Like, we just don't think about all of these implications. So really, it comes back to accountability. We have to start with the really basic stuff, and that's medicine. And I think that's a way of living more than just medicine. I know that's a ramble, but that's just, it gets me irritated. I mean, it just irritates me that we, what do you mean food? Really? You're going to just start with food? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, this happens all of the time. I had a similar experience a couple days ago. I was checking in at a hotel. I gave a lecture in Dallas, Fort Worth area. And the person behind the counter, she was an elderly person checking me in. She was probably in her 70s. And, she saw that I was a doctor on the intake form. She said, "Oh, what kind of medicine do you practice?" I said, "Naturopathic medicine." She said, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, it's licensed and regulated primary care curative medicine. So if you go to a naturopath, we're going to try to fix the problem, cure the problem, rather than just manage it with drugs." And she looked at me and she said, "You can't cure disease." Just like that. She was like, "What do you mean you can cure disease? Well, what are you talking about?" And then, the conversation started to go south really quickly because I understood that there was no convincing this person, right? But I think, well, I don't think I know that this happens frequently, that we are so, because we are 100% dyed in the wool through and through 24/7 naturopathic doctors, and we are completely knowledgeable and understanding about natural law, which is inviolate, right? It's a law. It's not a belief. It's a law, that we practice it so much that we forget that the vast majority of people in the world have absolutely no idea of, they don't even know how to pronounce naturopathy,
Yeah.
let alone know what the education of a naturopathic physician is, or the power of this medicine in order to provoke a cure. And it,
Right.
it has devolved into the culture of the pill, where there is
Yeah.
no accountability. There
Well,
is
and
no
that's what
responsibility.
you're
Okay.
seeing the same thing within our profession, right? That goes back to that division. Well, here we can't cure it because we haven't seen it cured ourselves as the
Right.
physician,
Right.
because they didn't do naturopathic medicine for a variety of reasons.
Right.
Uh, because when the schools were really kind of coming back full force, the folks that knew it were there for a while, but then they were trying to teach and you know practice medicine and help cure people. So then the schools had to figure out who we're going to get to teach. And so that's a whole separate conversation, but that's part of the division. Well, I'm going to give you a supplement to deal with
Right.
this problem instead of going, well, most of the patients I treat, in all honesty, 50% is mental emotional for
Mm,
the majority of patients, at least,
mm,
because it changes physiology.
mm,
But we know that we're taught that in basic sciences. We're taught that there's a hormone produced called somatostatin, which is inhibitory to multiple systems in the body, including thyroid function, including gastrointestinal tract, pancreatic function, adrenal gland function, blood vessel repair and formation. And yet we ignore that elephant because they don't have time for it, or I don't have a pill. So instead, I'm going to have to walk you through it. Maybe we do emotional freedom technique. Maybe we do some acupuncture points. Maybe we do hydrotherapy. Maybe we use homeopathy. Well, or all of them typically. But that's the point. We didn't give anything. We were teaching the person that yes, we have to do some really hard things. You have to be accountable. That patient I had yesterday, great lady, I've seen her for years. We've shifted the way we're doing some things in the practice because what I was seeing was naturopathic medicine can cure things that aren't supposed to be curable. You said it earlier, and Dr. Sensing always said there's no incurable disease, there's only incurable patients.
Right.
Those are the folks that really, they don't buy in, they don't want to believe. So I've had this lady, and what we've done is we've moved to more of a wellness destination style where I see you for a set number of months with much more intensive work because those people are much more committed to getting better so that they're not as frustrated at the end because they're going to do what we ask them to do. So I've seen her on the other side, fee for service for a year, visit here, visit there. And she never told me in this whole time that 29 years ago, her son died. He ended up getting in with the wrong crowd, had a drug overdose, and passed away. I said, ultimately, she's on a PPI, proton pump inhibitor, so she has acid reflux, and she's on Zoloft and hasn't been able to get off because every time she gets off, guess what happens? She becomes angry and hostile. I said, that's the problem. It is not the acid reflux. It is not the medication. It's that you've never worked through this, and that's what we ultimately have to do to get rid of your medications. It's not even we've changed our diet. Yes, lots of things got better when we did that, but the mental emotional piece is what is preventing her from removing the last of her medication. And so that's really what we're going to spend the next 3 months on.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? When you actually peel back the layers, often the exciting cause is right there in front of everybody's face, but because people haven't been educated about any of this, people have no idea. There's a gigantic disconnect. And I mean, it goes on and it goes on and it goes on because of the medical monopoly and the dumbing down of the educational system. Now there has arisen this whole, wellness culture. Well, thank you very much, but you can't, hot rock massage your way out of asthma. You can't do it.
Right.
And this is the reason that has shown up is because conventional medicine, right, doesn't practice healthcare, it practices disease management.
Right.
So inside of the conventional medical model, people get, that their symptoms are managed, their illness is managed, and nothing gets cured. They're just throwing stuff around to manage it. The root cause of the problem is never seen, it's never addressed, and never fixed. And therefore, the leading cause of death, or the first or the third leading cause of death, depending on how you crunch the numbers, is MD-directed medicine. And the leading cause of bankruptcy in this country is medical bills.
Yeah, we spend more money in the last 2 weeks of life on health care than any other point in any other country, I believe. I mean, that's just absolutely insane to me. And then when you get into medical, where we're talking about informed consent, I had another patient come in. This has probably been about 4 months ago now. Lady comes in. She had partial hysterectomy, and they gave her really basic informed consent in terms of this is what we're doing, and this is what we're doing. Nothing about what you might experience afterwards. Nothing about any kind of support that might be needed. And she was only in her 30s. And so she goes through, she has a hysterectomy. She comes into my office. It's a year after. And I said, we don't really need a whole lot of time to get you better. Because I go through this whole hour-long process, her and her husband. So when we do our first visits, we're a little unique. I make the spouse come. Because if you're going to work with me, we have decided in this clinic that I need both people involved on board, because healthcare is not a one-person entity that because it affects the whole family. I need to make sure you don't have to change, but I need to know that you're going to support the person because I'm going to ask them to do some things that are tough.
Yeah.
And so the husband's there, the wife's there. And I was like, really the issue is you're just pretty pissed off because nobody talked to you. So we're going to treat the anger. All the problems she had, the dizziness, the pain, everything was gone after 3 visits. Everything. All we did was change her diet. We treated her liver because in Chinese medicine, that's associated with anger and frustration. That was causing part of her sleep disturbance. And she's been completely fine. she's just like a new person. And it had nothing to do with giving her medicine. It was resolving the anger because of what the system did to her to try to treat a problem. I don't even remember.
Ooh, you're faded out on me there, Dr. Kinley. So Jason's screen is frozen at the moment. I hope it's not on my end. From my vantage point, his screen froze. So I'm going to assume. All right, we have the.
That's, what that is some higher intervention killing the internet. I'm sitting in my office with a brand new router, and it is not our technology issue. I think it is the provider, which is Comcast.
Yeah.
But that's what happens when you tell the truth. You tell the truth, and things, entities, whatever your belief structure is, I'm telling you, they don't want it out there.
Yeah, I was kicked off of TikTok a month ago, and I still don't know why. But in any event, right?
Yeah.
So tolle causum, right? We
Right.
have to get to the root of the problem. This is what we specialize in. This is what we do best. It's difficult. I will tell you one of the most difficult things that has been a level of frustration for me lately. It's and it all goes back. I mean, this from the Department of Redundancy department, and I don't know how many times I can beat this horse, but all of this, every single solitary problem that we have in the wonderful world of, Machiavellian medicine is because of the medical monopoly that's existed for longer than anybody's been alive. For example, right? I have a patient last week, migraine headaches. Oh, so I see you have a migraine headache. What's the pain feel like? They look at me like a deer in the headlights. Well, it's a headache. It hurts.
Right.
Well, what part of your head do you feel it in? Well, I feel it in my head. Well, do you feel it in the left temple? Do you feel it in the right temple? Do you feel it in the front of your head? Do you feel it in the back of your head? Is it ripping? Is it tearing? Is it burning? Is it pressing? Is it bursting? What's it feel like? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just extracting simple symptoms from people often is like pulling teeth. And it's not really through any fault of the patients. It's just because of the socialization process, which, they've grown up inside of. Nobody has ever taught them to think about things like this.
Right.
So they don't think about things like this, right? And people are used to spending 5 minutes with the doctor, all right? Because the medical doctors diagnose disease, naturopathic doctors diagnose treatments. And there's a gigantic difference between the two. There's a really big disconnect. I think it's a really good idea, Dr. Kinley, to rather than pay as you go type of a, conventional medical model, to have more of a package deal. Like, look, you want to work with me? It's a 9-month program. It's going to cost X amount of dollars. Here's how many visits it's going to be. Let's go.
Yep, and that's what we've done. And so what we do now is we include all of our labs, any supplements that we think we're going to need. We have these built-in banks that we call them budgetarily. And what it does is that way, if somebody comes in, we're going, okay, you're going to do this. I'm going to see you over a 3-month time frame. That's what the majority of our folks are in. I have significantly longer. We're going to see you over a 3-month time frame. And these are all the things. And if I need to ask them to do something, they can just do it because they paid for it. They're not worried about what the cost is going to be, because now they're investing in themselves. They're not investing in us. And what we're trying to teach them is we're trying to change your entire life. I had a couple come in back in May and I saw the husband, he's in his 40s. And I said, in order to get you where you want to go, I really want to work with you for X amount of time. It was 6 months. And he went home, talked to his wife and said, what if my wife and I do 3 months each? Great, let's do that. They had a couple of young boys at home. I said, because the thing is, one of their goals was to, improve their lifestyle, to improve their children's health. I said, oh, that's going to happen. I guarantee you, by you two working, because your kids are going to have to eat what you guys are making. And so they went and they changed and did everything we asked them, and they just couldn't believe the difference in their entire family life, right? Yeah. I don't need to see them on a regular basis, but what we do now is I see them once every 2 months, because I am now helping to keep them accountable to what their changes are that they've asked for. When we talk about accountability, that's where the coaching piece comes in. It's making sure, if you're telling me you want to change, did you do what we asked you to do? You did? Okay. Did it work? Yes. Great. It worked, but we have a challenge. That's where the medicine, that's where the art piece comes in. Okay, now I have to fine tune this because we need something else to address the concern that you had.
Right. Yeah, that's a wonderful model. How long have you been doing that?
We started doing that back in March of this year, beginning of March. And it has completely flipped our practice in a really great way. I mean, we are now able to do things that we couldn't do 8 months ago, realistically. Right. We're able to provide care in a different way. We know our patients much better. The trick is that a lot of people come in and they don't want to spend that much money, because we have taught them that your medical care is a copay, and that your $20 or $35 should get you what you need. Well, what it gets you is a prescription or a surgery, or, well, where we're at, and I know it's not unique to Spokane, because I'm hearing the same thing from larger cities. Spokane's roughly about 400,000 people. It might be up to 500,000 right now. COVID fluctuated numbers, so it's hard to have an accurate count. I don't think we've had a census since COVID hit, so I'm not sure where we're at, but it's a 6 to 10 month waiting list to get in to a specialist in Spokane.
Unbelievable.
To get into primary care as a new patient, 3 to 5 months.
Unbelievable.
For primary care, so that they can then be given a prescription to go to the pharmacy and get some pills.
Right.
For what? Because then you're going to get the bill that they were going to send you for your deductible anyway, unless you're on Medicare. Yep. Right? So you got a $10,000 plan. You spend $10,000 in my office if I need to see you for more than 9 or 10 months, right? But that's including everything, all your lab work. You know how many people I put into that level of care? Very, very few.
Yeah. I
mean, very few need anywhere near that.
Well, I mean, let's look at the numbers here. The excision of excess skin, and this is a plastic surgery treatment, $5,000. Breast augmentation, $4,600. Breast reconstruction, $6,221. Breast reduction, $6,308. Brow lift, $3,500. Facelift, $9,679. People are paying through the nose for cosmetic surgery, taking out care credit if they can't afford it themselves.
Well, here's another number to look at. Annual medical expenditures for people with diabetes annually, $19,736, according to the Diabetes Journals in 2022, which they approximate 12,000 is attributable to diabetes. $12,000 you're going to spend directly is what they're telling us because you have diabetes. So, it's funny because I'll sit down with somebody and I'll give them their financial number. Like, this is what I think this is what I want to see you for. This is what it's going to cost you. And they'll be like, oh, that's a lot of money. And I said, okay, so what you're telling me is you're not worth this much money. How much money are you worth?
Right.
Because that's what we've done to people. You have no value beyond your copay.
Right.
And it's disgusting.
It's a ridiculous model. And this is why we have a chronic disease epidemic. It's because of this model. And, Bobby Kennedy's all over social media now saying, well, he's going to, fix the chronic disease epidemic. And the first step is to clean up lunches in the children's lunches in the school. And okay, Bobby, that's a good idea, but that really isn't enough, by a long shot. What you cannot fix the current problem in medicine by managing the current paradigm.
Right.
It's the paradigm itself that's the problem.
100%.
It's the paradigm itself that needs to be changed. And the Zen sword that would cut this right off at the knees is medical freedom. And
Yeah.
that Benjamin Rush talked about, you know, in the 1700s.
Right.
Unless we put medical freedom into the Constitution, the time will come when medicine will organize itself into a dictatorship to restrict the art of healing to one class of people and deny equal privileges to others is the Bastille of medical science. All such laws are un-American and despotic. And that's exactly what's happened.
You know, Peter, that sounds like a conspiracy. I don't, I think that's conspiracy theory, conjecture. I don't know.
I tell you what the future of medicine is going to be if this doesn't change. Right? You're gonna be sick. You're gonna go to a medical center. You're gonna get on a conveyor belt. In order to start the conveyor belt, you're gonna have to put in your insurance card, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're seeing it now with virtual care. I mean, when COVID hit and the thing to me that's crazy is that they had medical students, conventional and naturopathic, working to see patients when they couldn't see a patient physically because of regulatory bodies, coming in and going, okay, now what's going to happen? Oh, well, we're going to treat you for pneumonia. Well, did you listen to their lungs? How could you? They're on a computer screen. I get patients in all the time. In fact, I had one yesterday. Who was it? The lady that has severe ulcerative colitis that they're talking about bowel resection. And I said, okay, I have to do your abdominal exam now. And I'm sure you've had this done a lot. Nope. Actually, I don't know the last time anybody touched my stomach.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you've had this problem for literally a decade.
Yeah.
And nobody has touched your stomach in all the visits that you had. How on God's earth do you know what's going on with this patient?
It's all about the lab work. It's all about the objective discovery, objective discovery, objective discovery, objective discovery. None of that involves touching the patient anymore.
But you're missing the objective discovery through your hands.
100%. But that's not what's taught in conventional medicine.
Right. And that's the thing, right? We're the quacks, even though Bates physical exam is a conventional standard for that exam. And what do they do with that book? They don't use it half the time.
Half the time. They don't use it 99% of the time.
And I go, it's like the DSM-5 for mental health criteria. 90+% of those conditions are treated with the same medications. That book is an insurance book to label the individual. It is not to solve the problem.
Right. Again, medical doctors are trained to diagnose a condition. Naturopathic doctors are trained to diagnose a treatment.
Well, and that's why it just boils down to the way we really live our life. And that's where medicine, the future of medicine is vitalism. And the future of medicine is really accountability and living this day to day. Because if you live this, there's very few things that you quote unquote end up having to treat.
Right.
You simply wait it out and support the system. I have 9 children. Most of the people listening may or may not know that. It's always the joke at the VG, you know, how many does he have now? But we just had a bout of, I don't know what went through the house. All my kids got some kind of stomach thing. We didn't do anything. Hydrotherapy, right? Water therapy to support their system, let them rest, give them fluids. We get a lot of phone calls from patients. I have to do something because they have a fever, because we have trained them that the fever is the problem. Wait a minute.
Fever is the cure.
That by design is what's supposed to happen. We don't want to interfere with it. Are there rare exceptions to this where the number is so out of control? Yes, but here's what I tell every patient. By the time your number gets anywhere close to that, you see some pretty serious signs showing up and you've gone to the ER because now it's probably life-threatening.
Yeah.
It is not an issue of the number, because your number doesn't cause a problem until you're at 109. And most people think it's 104 because that's what they're told. Oh my goodness, 104, give the Tylenol. It's one of the worst things you can possibly do. So we live that way. What do I mean by living that way? Well, where are you buying your food from? Are you buying whole food or are you buying organic? So let's talk about organic. What does it mean if it's an organic label, right? This is medicine. Organic has to be what percent organic on the label? 70. 30% of what's in your organic product can be pure garbage because that is an FDA, USDA labeling issue. It does not mean it's 100% organic. So this is where we delve into soy for a quick second. Soy is a controversial topic for a lot of people. For me, it's pretty straightforward. What I mean by that is if you were to buy organic GMO-free soy as soy and nothing else, is it the best thing since sliced bread? No. Does it cause cancer on its own? I don't think it does. I think that the whole thing with soy and the studies done with soy, they didn't look at organic GMO-free soy. They looked at soy sprayed at Roundup, which is what we do in this country. And we know Roundup is linked directly with cancer. So how can you tell me that a food product that Asian cultures have eaten forever and they don't have the same incidence, suddenly in this country is now the problem and avoid it? Are there nuances to that conversation depending on your patient? Absolutely. But soy in a processed product, is it the soy or is it all the other crap that you're eating? Right? So that's why I'm saying if we get back to make your food. I just had a patient the other day tell me, I just don't want to cook. Well, then you're telling me that to some extent you don't want health either.
Right.
Because what happens if we withhold food and water? You die. Which means every physiological process is based on what you put in your mouth, food and water. Now, the air quality you can only do so much about with spraying and all the other stuff that we do anymore, but that's why I talk about food and water. You do the best you can and you'll improve your outcomes dramatically. From there, you then find a supplement that might need to fit the niche of that particular patient to support the system because either A, they don't have access to something, they're so depleted that we have to build them up. Dr. Senseney used to talk about that all the time, right? The minerals, and Dr. Wallach has talked and published on that, minerals tend to be the bigger problem for a lot of patients because our food is so minerally deficient, and it has to do with farming practices, et cetera. People don't grow gardens. And what's the other thing people don't do anymore? They don't heat with wood. Well, how's that vitalistic? We're causing pollution in the air. Well, okay, but you got to heat your house. What did you do with your wood ash?
Right.
You put it in the garden. What is your wood ash comprised of? Minerals.
Yep.
Right? So the things that we used to do that actually provided substance to the human organism as well as to the soil, we've actually moved away from all of those things.
Yep.
And they're lost.
I am of the opinion that most of the moving away from these important things was done on purpose.
100%. I really blame our health care crisis on the Industrial Revolution.
100%.
Which is going to irritate some people, but that's my honest to God belief, because we said, hey, get out of the agrarian lifestyle where you're moving, you're having access to fresh air, exercise, you're raising your own food, you're bartering with people, whatever the case is. Let's move you into a highly concentrated situation with really poor sanitation. And now we're going to sell you spoiled meat, spoiled milk, all this crap in the streets. Oh, better step in with government regulation to control it, which I understand. That wasn't a bad thing. We don't want somebody getting sick because we sold bad products. And the agrarian lifestyle was tough. Did we have sanitation problems with those folks? Yes. However, by doing that, we became dependent on somebody else telling us what we should be doing instead of going, that smells bad. I don't think I should eat that. I just, that's my own take on it. Did we freeze again?
No, I'm back. That was my bad.
Okay, no, we're good. I just technology.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, you are 100% spot on correct. And it's been a unfortunate series of events, each following the other. But I think that these things were done intentionally on purpose in order to make people sick. And then, the only medical system that people by and large have access to is the disease management medical system that throws a pill at it.
Yep.
A good friend of mine is a pretty famous retired orthopedic surgeon. His name is Dave Janda. And I was having a conversation with him a couple months ago. He's retired now. And he got a phone call from one of his colleagues who isn't retired, who works at the same hospital that he used to. And he said, "Oh, you're not going to believe it. This hospital was just acquired by an HMO or by some health management group." And he said now they have administrators trailing all of the doctors, not allowing the doctor to spend more than 5 minutes with the patient. That's,
You know, that's the thing, is that that's one thing that I try to convey to patients, because as patients are leaving the dark side and coming over,
yeah.
and COVID really put a broad spotlight on that. And people started to go, okay, wait a second. And even the folks that thought, okay, the vaccine is crazy, whatever. And then now all the data that's come out to support those who were like, I think there's a problem. We're seeing that there's a problem. People are continuing to migrate away from that particular side. I have to go back and tell them, look, most of the time, it's not the doctor that's in the conventional system that's the problem. It's the system that trained the physician that's the problem, because 100%. They really, truly believe that they set out to do good and help people. And so I want to make sure that we're distinguishing when we talk, or at least when I talk about this, and I truly believe you're the same way, it's not the doctors that we're talking about. It's the system that's in place that's keeping these doctors and their hands tied. I had a visit yesterday with a young lady. She's in her 20s. And what she didn't tell me was that her mother was a trauma surgeon. So I had no idea. I'm having this visit. I've met with the daughter before for 10 minutes. And so now I'm having a visit with her and her mom to make sure, because mom's involved with the financial decision-making process. And I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Her mom's a major trauma surgeon. And the mom starts out by going, you know, she scheduled this visit. I didn't know anything about it. I think she's, you know, going in the wrong direction. And a lot of people might have just gotten uncomfortable and been like, okay, well, I got to figure out what. And so I just went right back to her and said, okay, tell me about that. What do you mean you think she's going in the wrong direction? Well, I think she needs an allergy test and blah, blah, blah. I said, well, here's the problem with allergy testing. We have a very limited number of conventional allergists in town. You're looking at least 6 months before you're going to get in. And typically, as you know, in medicine, in the world of medicine, most allergy testing, you get very mixed results with. So here's what we can do. And based on all of your daughter's problems, I went into the somatostatin conversation that I had with you a little bit ago. I said, we have to look at all these other pieces. We cannot ignore that. My job, because I have time with the patient, I said, your job is critical. Somebody has a major injury. We need what you do. You don't have time to assess all of these pieces. You're literally performing life-saving surgery. Because I have the flexibility, I need to talk to your daughter about all of these other emotional issues that you're saying that she's been dealing with for years, and you guys haven't gotten results. So the reason I bring this conversation up is we're talking about the doctors aren't the bad people, the system is bad. And she even said, you know, by the end of the conversation, she had warmed up quite a bit and said, yeah, I need to talk to my daughter. I don't know what they're going to do. They may or may not move forward. But they said, you know, I have my own biases and I am aware that I have those. And she was open and warm about it. And the reason I'm bringing this up is we cannot be afraid to talk to another provider because we think they're superior to us. Because there's this thing when you go through school that the conventional system, you know, when I went to school, they said you have to take insurance. Like that's how you're going to make it. Because I'm in a state where insurance NDs can take it. There was a clinic here in Spokane that had taken insurance for 20 years. As of January this year, they terminated all their contracts. I don't think there are any naturopaths left in our area that take insurance, maybe one. And so, you know, I said this in an interview I did a long time ago. I said, you know, at the end of the day, and I said this last year at the VG too, we are not the alternative healthcare providers. The conventional system is the alternative to real medicine.
Yeah, right. That's a nice reframe, and you're 100% correct, so, as always. So we've got 10 minutes. To my wife. We've got 10 minutes left. Let's get into pragmatics if we can, just a little bit. So inside of your new paradigm, right, you want to be treated at my clinic. It's a 6-month deal. It's a 9-month deal, whatever. Yep. Are there therapeutics? And I know everybody's different, and I know the treatment needs to be individualized, and I get that. But generally speaking, which therapeutics do you lean on more than others?
Most.
Yeah.
So food assessment, the Carroll food assessment is number one. It's baseline. And the reason for that is that's my frame of reference. And what I mean by that is if you're following the Carroll and something doesn't work well, I know it's not a food derived problem now. I know there's something else that I have to go after.
Oh,
Right.
that's interesting.
Because if the number of patients that get better when I use the food assessment, if it resolves their problems, which it happens. So for example, I had a lady with a skin disorder for 3 years. They had done biopsies. Dermatologist thought maybe it was cutaneous B-cell lymphoma. Then it wasn't. It was something else. They couldn't come up with an answer. We did her Carroll. So step one, all of a sudden the skin rash started to disappear. Then we did hydrotherapy. That's another therapeutic that I lean on. And when you do hydrotherapy with the stim, the electronic component, it adds voltage to the system. And we heard Dr. Jerry Tennant at the Vital Gathering last year, and he gave the data behind why adding voltage is so important for the body to begin to heal. So if we remove the offending food, we add voltage to the system, it's amazing what can happen. So those are two primary therapeutics that I lean on hard with 99% of my patients. There are a few exceptions. From there are some labs that I will run looking for viral infections. Now that gets into an interesting conversation that we don't have time for, based on Dr. Thomas Cowan. We heard him a few years ago. He's written some books, et cetera, including The Truth About Contagion, describing some of the challenges with viral replication and testing viruses, et cetera. Interesting information, not sure what to make of it yet, but it's there. It is interesting. But I will look at those, and then I lean on herbal remedies and homeopathics and physical medicine. So every one of my patients will get herbal medicine. I would say 85% have a clear homeopathic picture out of the gate, so they'll get a homeopathic remedy. There are people who are better with homeopathy than I am, but it is a tool that I draw on for the majority of my patients because I know out of the gate what I'm using. There are a handful where I go, it could be here, this one, and I wait a little bit and do a few other things first and come back to it to see if it clears the picture for me. So food, hydrotherapy, homeopathics, herbal medicine, physical medicine. So in Washington State, we do spinal manipulation. I'm trained by Activator, which is a chiropractic tool, but I was actually trained by Activator methods. So I use Activator a lot because it's gentle. I use acupuncture needles. I'm not an acupuncturist, but my license in Washington allows me to use a needle for IV therapeutics, et cetera. So I needle just a couple of points. Large intestine 4. There's a few other things that I'll do with acupuncture needles. We have IV therapeutics in my clinic. And some people say, well, that's not vitalistic. Well, it depends. If the person is so depleted or they've been vomiting for days or diarrhea, whatever, I can get them hydrated. I'd rather have them get hydrated in my clinic than go to the ER, because now I can help them with all the other things too, and not just charge them $500 for a bag of fluid.
Yeah, right. What about colon hydrotherapy? Have you ever messed around with that?
So I'm actually trained in colon hydrotherapy as well. I just don't have the staff or the space to do it. Yeah. Although interestingly enough, we have colonics in our building with a different person. Yeah. I haven't really referred over to her. I don't like what's called the closed system. I don't know how much you know about it, but there are two primary systems in colon hydro: open and closed. Open is you can evacuate on your own. Closed is based on pressure regulation. I'm not a fan of the closed system. I think it works well. I don't like it, so I don't recommend it. That's my own bias. There's my.
So, all right, generally speaking, if you give a hydrotherapy treatment, how long is it from start to finish?
Hydrotherapy with us is about an hour. And there's a few other things that we can do that you can't do at home: diathermy, ultraviolet light. It depends on what's going on for the patient that we'll use. We'll modify the therapy depending on what we're trying to heal.
Just a little anecdotal aside here. This just popped into my frontal cortex, so I'll share it. There was a homeopath in Chicago years ago. His name was Grimmer, I think, if I have that right. Might have been Grimmer, or it might have been Krill. I can't remember who it was, but there was some guy in the past who developed a bipolar theory of health. right? And that the cells have, yeah, every cell has an electronic and a positive and a negative electrical charge. And that very much the same way that Tennant is talking about, in order for the
Right.
body to be healthy, the cells have to be dynamically charged with, the frequency has to be above a certain threshold, right? The voltage has to be above a certain
Yep.
threshold. Well, this guy put forth the notion that the human body is a battery, that the stomach provides the acid, the bones provide the base, the brain is the positive pole, and the liver is the negative pole.
Hmm.
So I'm thinking to myself, well, that's interesting because, with Alzheimer's disease, right, the brain is going south. I think it's a double whammy with Alzheimer's because of the statin drugs. Number one, the
Oh, yeah.
statin drugs cause inflammation in the liver in order to decrease the liver's production of cholesterol. The brain is made from cholesterol, so that's not good. But number two, it's also, if he's correct, if this, electrical theory of the human body is correct, you're messing up the polarity of the human body by messing up the liver. And that's going to have a direct impact on the brain and the way that
Right.
the brain works, because you've disrupted the polarity of the human body. I just think it's a fascinating thing to talk about. I really think that that's this whole body electric thing is going to be a big thing moving forward, and more money needs to be poured into that, I think.
Yep.
Again, because of the medical monopoly, I'm not sure if any of that's going to happen.
Well, and that's where we have to talk to each other, right? And go, what are you seeing clinically? Because we're not going to get the
Right.
test. I mean,
Right.
there's things that, people will
That's right.
naysay, oh, well, there's no test on this. Where's your controlled trial? Do you realize that 50% of those controlled trials are what? Garbage.
Yeah.
Even the conventional system says that 50% of what we know in medicine 10 years later, oops, we were wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't really care at this point what those RCTs are. Are they valuable potentially for clinical thinking to ponder over? Well, that's an interesting idea. Yes,
Yeah.
but so is what my colleagues are doing. Well, that's
Right.
really interesting. I don't know what to make of that yet. But you know what? If it's not going to hurt you, I'm sure as heck willing to give it a go, because maybe we'll see some benefit. I mean, that's what happened with Dr. Pollack when he presented on water 2 years ago at the Vital Gathering. I went back to my clinic and I thought, based on all of his research with polarity and talking about the exclusion zone, and you need ultraviolet light, what happens if I just give somebody a bag of saline and go stick them in the sun? And sure enough, some people started to get better. And so I was like, well, would they have gotten better if I just gave them water?
Yeah.
Maybe. So we started to play with that. And the results were not conclusive enough to go, ooh, I'm going to keep doing and make that the focus. But when we do IV therapeutics for our patients and the weather's nice, we stick them outside, because at least they're in the somewhat fresh air. We're in an urban environment. That's why I say somewhat, but they're getting sun. Like, we're exposing them to nature while giving them something that has potential benefit for their body. So we're really increasing the level of therapy.
And historically, that was why there were medical conferences.
Right.
Because individual doctors from all around the country, years before the internet, right, would be doing different things in their clinic and seeing different results, and then they'd all come together once a year and share their results.
Right.
No double-blind, placebo-controlled trial necessary. It's just, here's what I've been doing. Here's what happened. What do you think? And that's another reason, ladies and gentlemen, to attend the Vital Gathering.
Yep. I'll actually be presenting this year on, I'm doing a physical medicine component on the gastrointestinal tract. So some of the things that I alluded to, I'm going to be walking through, showing you what I do, and then talking about the rationales behind each one. And the thing is, it's not that I learned it from somebody else. It's pieces that I've learned from all over and put together to create my own thing that works for me in my clinic. Right. And that gets back to what you were talking about. Hey, what are you doing? I've been doing this and I've added different components over the years, and this is where I'm at now. And this is what I'm doing, and this is what I see work.
Well, this is, this goes again to the old motto that the halls of conventional medicine are littered with the discarded remains of stupid, outdated treatments, because those treatments were just reality by consensus, didn't have
Yeah.
anything to do with anything rather than somebody's notion, right?
Right.
But in naturopathic medicine, we don't discard anything. We add things.
Right. We go, what's
Because,
useful? Oh, that's interesting.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is, again, from the shameless self-promotion department, go to the Vital Gathering. If you're watching this, make sure you attend the Vital Gathering every year,
Yeah.
because this is how the profession grows. This is how the profession maintains its integrity. And this is how the profession sinks deeper and deeper roots, is by doctors like Dr. Kinley, who are experimenting with the vitalistic approach, can share with you what they've experienced.
Right.
And, that beats a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. Dr. Kinley, appreciate you, appreciate your time. Never stop doing what you're doing. And God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll see you around campus.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you, Dr. Glidden.